Okay, sir.
Okay, thank you. This is Eco 501, Section 2, Spring 2020, BRAC University MBA program. Today is Tuesday, 15th February. Okay, so this week we'll do exactly what we did on Saturday with the Section 1. We'll revisit some basic concepts that we did probably in high school. Most of us in both the sections have done a basic economics course, so we are familiar with some of these topics. But the problem যেটা হয়, most of us in these two sections have come from private universities that have 3 semesters in a year. আর যেটা হয় কি একটা সেমিস্টারের মধ্যে 24টা ক্লাস জ্যাম প্যাকড হয়ে থাকে না, they sandwich 24 classes in a semester, so ultimately যেটা হয় অনেক অনেক কনসেপ্ট গুলো in depth পড়ানো যায় না. So that's another reason why we'll revisit some topics, and plus we'll look at a few things. Number one, how mathematics looks at a convention, how economics will look at a convention. By doing so, if our brain is totally wired for a mathematics convention, the moment we go for economics convention, it's going to look just the opposite. Why does that happen? We'll discuss that. And last week I planned to start demand and supply, but I overran. So I'm not going to do demand and supply this week for you either. But what the demand and supply model is, I'll just discuss, and how much of that demand and supply model we will be focusing on in an MBA program. That will be the last part of the discussion class today. So I'll yeta kori. Can you see the slides?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Yes, sir.
Sure.
Okay, lovely.
Yes, sir.
So topics today are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. As I said, demand and supply I could not cover. So last week what I did, I just gave a little summary of 5 to 7 minutes. That's what I'll do again. Our references will be Stiglitz and Walsh, McGuigan et al. Wherever the reference is, the page number will be given in the slide, so you can refer to them. And these two texts are available in the Google Drive. Today's slides are also available in the Google Drive. I uploaded them after the Saturday class. Okay, so there's many ways of approaching a problem in economics. You can approach it with graphs, you can approach it with mathematics, you can also approach it with econometrics. These are the three main popular ways of approaching a problem. For us, we will be focusing on graphs. So what we are going to do, we're going to revisit some basic concepts of graphs. Then we see how economics made a little bit of tampering with the two axes. Okay, so first of all, this is from Stiglitz and Walsh, 47 and 50 page numbers. It's just a little appendix that introduces how to read a graph and how to interpret a slope. So we'll once we do a graphical analysis, we also have to know what a slope is and how that slope can be interpreted with economic logic. And the basis of our analysis will be high school maths. Now, first of all, we all know that a graph is basically a two-dimensional expression of a relationship between two variables.
Yes, sir.
And conventionally, when we learn a graph in high school, or nowadays kids learn it in primary school, they're exposed to two axes, which is an x-axis and a y-axis. It's a convention. X-axis is the horizontal axis, y-axis is the vertical axis.
Vertical.
Acha. Why is x-axis known as the horizontal axis? When we look at the horizon, we always look like this, right?
Yes, sir. ভূমির সাথে। জি, sir.
Acha. Do we look at a horizon like this?
No, sir.
No, sir.
Acha, এই তো বাস হয়ে গেল উত্তর। Our brain is wired to see a horizontal movement from left to right as a plus movement.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
As my finger is moving from your left to right, it's a horizontal movement, and the brain automatically wires us to read this as a positive movement. And if it's from right to left, according to your camera, again it's a horizontal movement, but we read it as a negative movement. So that's the horizontal axis. It comes from the word horizon. In Bangla, we call it anubhumik or onubhumik. I can't remember what the name is.
Yes, sir. Anubhumik.
Anu na onu?
স্যার আনুভূমিক
তো আমার কেন যদি মাঝে মাঝে মনে হয় অনুভূমিক। যাই হোক, ভূমি ভূমি শব্দটা আছে। So it must be right.
আনুভূমিক is adjective I guess and অনুভূমি হচ্ছে noun.
Oh,
Both are right. The
okay.
terms are
Okay, lovely. And the other axis is the vertical axis. The word vertical comes from the word vertex, which means the top point. ঠিক আছে? So when we are looking at a movement like this vertically, we automatically register it as a positive movement, right? Upwards.
Yes, sir.
And when we look at it like this, it's also a vertical movement, but we register that
It's falling. Yes,
it's
sir.
falling down, so it's a negative movement. So based on that, from high school maths, we know that the first quadrant is the quadrant where X and Y. If somebody wants to say, no, I don't want to call it X and Y, I want to call it something else, Q and P, both of the values are positive, right? On the in the first quadrant.
Yes, sir. Both are applicable.
Okay, lovely. Now in economics, since we do not consider any negative values for the variables, our full concentration will be in the first quadrant. Price can fall, quantity can fall, but neither price nor quantity can ever be negative. If somebody says, okay, the y-axis is going to be cost, no problem, your cost will go up and down, but cost can never be negative.
Yes, sir.
So the first thing that we do, we break away from mathematics in the sense that mathematics has negative values for x and y. That's why mathematics encompasses all the four quadrants. Since there are no negative values in economics, we concentrate totally on the first quadrant. Shesh. Next thing is, what is causation and what is correlation? In your undergrad, you must have done a basic statistics course. And in that basic statistics course, one of the topics was correlation, right?
Yes, sir.
We do.
Correlation, sir.
We say that y is something, x is something else. And then we try to find a pattern. Let me give you an example. Slide example. The children of rich parents end up becoming rich. This is the hypothesis. Okay, so on the y-axis, if we have the parents' income, and on the x-axis, if we have the children's income one generation later, we might find there's a trend. There's a positive correlation between the two variables.
Yes, sir.
Sir, one is
Values of
dependent
x
variable,
influence
another
the
one
values
is,
of y.
Now, okay, somebody says something?
yes, sir. One is dependent variable and another one is independent.
না এখন আমরা ডিপেন্ডেন্ট ইন্ডিপেন্ডেন্ট আসছি
Okay, okay, sir.
একটু পরে আসবো. The thing is, if we just from common sense, we can observe that kids of rich parents tend to become rich. ঠিক আছে? Kids of poor parents tend to become poor. So if we want
Sir,
to,
it's because of correlation, right?
why is it because of correlation? Because can we say the correlation means there's a pattern. ঠিক আছে? If we plot the data, we'll find that there's an upward pattern. তখন কিন্তু we might end up in this what do you call it? This fallacy that because a parent is rich, the child is rich. The moment we ask the question like this, because a parent is rich, the child is rich, then the question of causation comes into the picture. একটু আগে যে বলেছিল না ডিপেন্ডেন্ট এন্ড ইন্ডিপেন্ডেন্ট ভেরিয়েবল, একজন বললো না?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
আচ্ছা, so if we use the concept of dependent and independent variable, then we are using causation. Is it because a parent is rich, thus the child is rich? If the answer is yes, then we can find a dependent and independent relationship. Cause. The cause is what? The independent, parents' wealth. Effect ki?
Cause
The
effect.
dependent, the child's wealth. ঠিক আছে? Similarly, if we ask the question like this, is it because a parent is poor, thus the child is poor? তাহলে এখানে causation চলে আসছে না?
জি স্যার।
The moment we ask the question like this, then the question of dependent and independent variable comes into the picture. Acha, এখন now let's get back to the correlation part. Can we say that because a parent is rich, thus the child will be rich? Yes,
না স্যার।
there's a pattern. Definitely, there's a pattern. If we take 10,000, 20,000 data, but can we say what the parent's wealth is the reason why the child has become rich?
No sir, not every time.
সবসময় বলা যাবে না, and that's why when we plot the data on a graph, we have to be very careful whether it is a correlation, it's a pattern, or whether it's a causation.
The causation.
ঠিক আছে? তাহলে so we've narrowed it down to one thing, that we will be concentrating totally on the first quadrant, because economics does not have any negative values. Then the relationship, we were asked whether a relationship is functional or not. If it is functional, it is causation. If not, then we might see a pattern which is a correlation but not a dependent independent variable relationship. Okay?
Sir, but functional মানে আমি বুঝিনি।
A functional একটু পরে বলবো, y is equal to function of x. Okay, we'll come to that.
Causation.
আচ্ছা, আর এই this thing we have also mentioned right now that
স্যার
the x,
কজেশনটা যদি আরেকবার একটু বলতেন স্যার, একটু মানে আমি মিস করে ফেলছি স্যার।
okay, causation টা হচ্ছে if we use the word cause, তার মানে কি না আগে পিছে দুটো ঘটনা ঘটবে না? Because there was lots of clouds in the sky, today it rained.
Yes, sir. One cause leads to another event. Yes.
But just because a parent is rich does not necessarily imply that the child will also be rich. এখানে আমরা cause effect বলতে পারবো in the case of the parent and the child?
No sir.
But we can definitely say because it was very cloudy today, ঠিক আছে, therefore it rained. Plus
Yes,
it was
we can say this.
or whatever. Okay.
Yes sir, got it sir.
When we are talking about causation, we are talking about a functional relationship. এটা একটু পরে আমি আসবো, ঠিক আছে? When we clarify what we mean by independent and dependent variable. Okay, so this thing we have also mentioned that the x-axis is the horizontal axis, and our brain is wired to see left to right movement as positive, right to left as negative. Here. Oh, here it is. Oh, y-axis negative. Actually, yes, y-axis is just out. আচ্ছা, এখন আমরা দেখি y is a function of x. From high school, we have seen this relationship, right?
Yes, sir.
Acha, did anybody verbally interpret this relationship to you? Naki just বলছে
No,
y
sir.
মুখস্থ করে ফেলো, পরেরটা পরে দেখা যাবে. When how did they teach you in school? Y is equal to function of x মুখস্থ করলা, then you proceed, right?
Sir, they
Yes, sir.
actually explain like why x is in y is independent. Nah, x is independent and y is dependent. So
Okay.
that's why like y.
Okay, so when we say y is a function of x, that means verbally y depends on the value of x.
Yes sir.
তাই না? আমরা যখন বলি y is equal to function of x, এখন if some people don't have a mathematical brain, then and it's not a problem not to have a mathematical brain, but we can at least verbally interpret something. So when we say y is a function of x, verbally we are actually indicating that y it depends on the value of x.
Yes, sir.
Acha, if this hypothesis is accepted, then can we come to this conclusion that x changes first, then y changes?
Absolutely, sir.
Yes,
Because
sir.
the value of
Yes,
y
sir.
depends on the value of x. যার কারণে আমরা লিখছি y is equal to function of x. Then from there, verbally, we can interpret that x is the value that changes first, then y changes.
Yes, sir.
So the first property of independent and dependent variable is independent variable is the variable that changes first. Dependent variable is the variable that changes after the independent variable.
Yes, sir.
And conventionally, in economics and in mathematics, when we write y is a function of x, we automatically assume that conventionally y is the dependent variable, x is the independent variable on the. আচ্ছা কেউ যদি লিখতো x is a function of y, তাহলে কিন্তু y becomes the independent variable, x becomes the dependent variable.
Dependent variable.
ঠিক আছে, it's a convention. There's no logic behind it. This is how things have developed, and this is how things have been done. So when we say independent and dependent variable is the change that happens first, x, which we put on the right side. Dependent variable is the variable that changes after the independent variable, which we plot on the left hand side.
Left side.
Achha, this is the first condition. Second condition হচ্ছে y depends on x. So if x and y happen before and after, y must have happened after x and because of x.
Yes, sir.
Since y depends on x and x is the change that happens first, if we want to establish a functional relationship between y and x, then we have to say y changes after x and because of x. ঠিক আছে, do we agree?
Yes, sir. We
Acha.
agree.
If we I'll give you the interesting example. সেটা হচ্ছে just because two events happen one after another does not necessarily imply that the first one is independent, second is dependent.
Yes, sir.
For example, if we are watching a cricket match, ঠিক আছে, and suppose this is the last ball and Sakib Al Hasan is facing it, ঠিক আছে, এখন এসে বলটা ফেস করে নাই, one of your friend just enters the room. That's the first event. Next event কি সাকিব আল হাসান আউট হয়ে গেল. So what do we normally do? ওই বন্ধুটাকে বলি না তুই বেটা একটা কুফা.
Yes, sir.
হ্যাঁ? So এখন তাহলে কি আমরা বলতে পারি because the friend entered the class, thus সাকিব আল হাসান got out. যেটা তো আগে পিছে ঘটেছে.
না স্যার লজিক্যালি রাইট না বাট মজায় বলতে পারি।
এটা আমরা বলি এটা সচেতন করে, ঠিক আছে? So the moral of the story is just because two events happen erroneously, randomly, one after another, does not necessarily imply the first is
relationship between those two events.
তখন আমাদের বলতে হবে y changes after x and because of x. If this happens in a data set, then we can establish a causation relationship, which we can now call a functional relationship. Okay, so let's get back to the slides. These things are quite self-explanatory. So causation, when we talk about causation, we write it as y is equal to function of x, expressed as functions. So x changes first, the independent variable, aj. The two conditions, y changes after x and because of x. Both after and because have to hold for a functional relationship. Otherwise, what happens is that the two events may be just randomly happening.
Yes,
Now, if we write something like this, quantity demanded by a household is a function of price, then we are saying that price changes first, then the household decide how to dictate their consumption pattern for that particular month. এখানে কি আমরা
Yes,
বলতে
sir. How to react to the price? Yes, sir.
এখানে বলতে পারি না যে this is a functional relationship, quantity demanded is a function of
Yes, sir.
price? এখানে আমরা বলতে yes, price is the independent variable and quantity is the dependent variable. Why? Quantity demanded changes after the price and because of the price.
Yes, sir.
So we can say that this is not a random event. Now, a guest comes to the house, first event, your team wins a match, happens later. তখন আমরা বলি, you brought good luck. আসলে তো তা না. The two events happen randomly. Because the two events happen randomly, Y is after X, but not because of X.
Yes, sir.
এই জিনিসটা আমরা আবার এখন বলছি. Do children of professionals and high income parents get better jobs? We can definitely find a pattern, but in order to prove it as a functional relationship, which many empirical studies have done, সেই ক্ষেত্রে কিন্তু তাদেরকে অনেক কাঠখড় পোড়াতে হয়।
জি স্যার, অনেক অ্যানালাইসিস করতে হয়।
Analysis করতে হবে। Otherwise, just because your parents are rich does not necessarily imply you will be rich. Just because your parents are poor also does not necessarily imply that you will be poor.
Yes, sir.
আচ্ছা, এইটা তাহলে হচ্ছে causations are expressed as functions. We've discussed this, and এটা হচ্ছে function of. That means P is the independent variable, X is a function of P, or Q is a function of P. So Q depends on P. So P changes first, Q changes
Q
after.
changes later. Yes, sir.
আচ্ছা, general form হচ্ছে এটা, we know this. আচ্ছা, এখন হচ্ছে this is something that will be detour from mathematics. I don't know whether they told you in the undergrad when you did an economics course. Mathematics, by convention, X is always the independent variable. Whatever function we try to plot on a graph, by convention, if we are following the mathematics convention, ঠিক আছে, X is the independent variable, Y is the dependent variable. এখানে those of you who are very good in mathematics, do you agree? X by definition is always
Yes,
the independent variable, and Y by definition is always the independent variable, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, now let's get back to our graph. আমরা যখন এটা লিখছি, quantity demanded is a function of price. When you plotted a demand function, where was price? On the horizontal axis or on the vertical axis?
Horizontal axis, sir.
Where was price?
Sir, price will be in the horizontal axis.
Where was price in a demand curve?
Vertical axis.
Oh, no, sir. Vertical axis, Y axis. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, let's do it in equally, yeah? আচ্ছা, এইভাবে ছিল না? This is how we plotted a demand curve or a supply curve, তাই না?
yes, sir.
So, and then we just said this is a demand curve. So, quantity demanded is a function of price. Now, if we are wired with mathematics, then automatically this should have been the independent variable, তাই না? The x-axis.
Yes, sir.
এখানে তাহলে এই যে আমরা ফাংশনটা যেভাবে লিখেছি, তাতে কি ইন্ডিপেন্ডেন্ট ভেরিয়েবল x অ্যাক্সিসে আছে নাকি y অ্যাক্সিসে আছে?
Y axis এ আছে।
এই বাকিরা এটা ফলো করতে পারছে তো? ক্যান ইউ সি দ্য ডিফারেন্স নাও?
Yes, sir.
আচ্ছা,
Yes,
তাহলে এই কথা বলার উদ্দেশ্যটা হচ্ছে this is where economics makes a reverse convention. Price, the independent variable is on the vertical axis 9 out of 10 times. The dependent variable in a functional relationship in economics 9 out of 10 times will be on the horizontal axis. ঠিক আছে? Did any one of your teachers tell you that in the undergrad? Probably not. Did anybody think why is price on the vertical axis? আচ্ছা, কেউ think করেনি, আচ্ছা অসুবিধা নাই। Now at least I'm telling you now. This is a convention that was introduced in economics by a gentleman called Alfred Marshall. He was in economics at Cambridge. He did this convention. After that, this convention stuck. ঠিক আছে, এর কোনো লজিক নাই। He was obsessed with making graphs, and then he found out if the price is on the vertical axis, demand গ্রাফটা মানুষ এভাবে পড়বে, প্রাইস কমছে, কোয়ান্টিটি ডিমান্ডের বাড়ছে। ঠিক আছে, so for visual convenience, he put price on the vertical axis, the independent variable, and that stuck as a convention. ঠিক আছে, so and what problems this arises, we will see that later. ঠিক আছে, so this is just a little convention in economics. Okay, so horizontal and y x is the horizontal, acha the x axis is the horizontal axis. Oh, এগুলো তো হয়ে গেছে তো, আরে এগুলি আমরা দেখছি। আচ্ছা, এগুলি কি দেখা দরকার? না না, আমরা এত দূর যাইনি। ও আচ্ছা, এটা পরে আসি। আচ্ছা, এটা তো we have already discussed. Is it clear that the second quadrant is not a quadrant that we are interested in?
Yes,
Yes.
sir. We will only consider first quadrant.
The third quadrant, both of them are minus. Third quadrant also, one of them is minus. So fourth quadrants are available, but we will focus only on the first quadrant because economics rules out any negative value for any variable. আচ্ছা, এখন দেখি আমরা, we are going to read this graph. This is most probably this is from Stiglitz and Walsh. It's figure 2.1. এখানে একটা opportunity set তৈরি করব আমরা। আচ্ছা, in this opportunity set, DVDs are on the x-axis, CDs are on the y-axis. Acha, before we plot it in a graph, let us try to see can we analyze this thing. কোথায় গেল? আচ্ছা, আবার এই প্রবলেমটা হচ্ছে। আচ্ছা, look at the x-axis. This is DVDs. Look at the y-axis. This is CDs. What do you understand by this point? The first point. If a consumer decides to buy only DVDs, he can buy no CDs, right?
Yes, sir.
এটা সবাই বুঝছে তো? The first point
Yes,
says,
sir.
since there's a limited budget, so if the consumer decides, Michelle, to buy only DVDs, Michelle can buy 6 DVDs and no CDs. Where do you visualize this point? X is the axis of DVDs, Y is the axis of CDs. So where do you visualize the first point?
Sir, the origin point.
DVDs,
Okay. X is the axis where we have DVDs. Y is the axis where we have CDs. This is the vertical axis, Y. If the consumer decides to buy only DVDs within her budget, then she can buy 6 DVDs and 0 CDs. That মানে Y এর value to 0, X এর value to maximum.
vertical হবে, sir.
Vertical.
এটা
It
No,
will
no, no, vertical.
it will be the intercept on the X axis.
Yes, sir.
Oh, sir.
না বুঝতে পারছি বললে হবে না, try to visualize it.
Sir, please repeat. Can you please repeat again?
It's good. That's why আমি আজকে ক্লাসটা বারবার করব এই কারণে some people have problems getting it. আচ্ছা, if I spend my entire budget, I can buy 6 DVDs. This is on the x-axis. I cannot buy any what do you call it, CDs. তাহলে y এর ভ্যালুটা 0 না,
Yes.
x এর ভ্যালুটা ম্যাক্সিমাম না, 6 CDs.
Yes, sir.
Isn't that on the intercept of the x-axis?
Yes, sir.
Can you visualize it now?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
If I can't buy any CDs, which is on the y-axis, I'm on the origin, 0. But I can buy 6 DVDs, which is over here. That means this point must intercept the x-axis.
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. তাহলে এখন আমরা আরেকটা পয়েন্ট প্লট করার চেষ্টা করি, the other one. What about this
Two.
point? No, this point. এই পয়েন্টে কি বোঝা যাচ্ছে? If the consumer decides to do the opposite, she spends her entire budget. She can buy 12 CDs, which is on the y-axis, and 0 DVDs, which is on the x-axis.
Y-intercept.
Good. Does it is all the other people also seeing the red point as the y-intercept?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. তাইলে when we plot a curve, since we are looking only at the first quadrant, most of the functions will intercept one of the two axes or both the axes. ঠিক আছে?
Yes, sir.
এখন এই স্ট্রেট লাইনটাকে তো আমরা ম্যাথমেটিক্যালি আরো নিচে নামাতে পারবো। নামালে কি হবে?
জি স্যার।
y এর মানটা নেগেটিভ হবে। নেগেটিভ তো ভ্যালু আমরা অ্যাকসেপ্ট করছি না।
জি স্যার।
থেকে উঠাতে পারবো, কিন্তু উঠালে কি হবে? x এর মানটা নেগেটিভ হবে। We are not seeing any negative CDs. CDs cannot be negative. So any graph, any function that we plot in economics, most of the times, not always, not the universal rule, they will intercept one of the two axes, অথবা both of them. So if we now plot this back, AJ, if the consumer decides to buy only DVDs, she can buy 6 DVDs and 0 CDs. তো এটা একটা x intercept না?
জি স্যার।
আচ্ছা, similarly, if the consumer decided to do just the opposite, she can buy 12 CDs and 0 DVDs.
0 DVDs.
Intercept. Okay?
Yes, sir.
তাহলে আমাদের এই স্ট্রেট লাইনটা জাস্ট ইন্টারসেপ্ট দুটোকে যদি আমরা আইডেন্টিফাই করতে পারি, the straight line is this. Finish. So many of the times when we look at a functional relationship, a graphical presentation of a functional relationship, সেই ক্ষেত্রে we will try to look at the intercept. আচ্ছা, একটা বিন্দুতে যদি ইন্টারসেপ্ট করে তাহলে কি হবে? That question is always there. Where is it? If this is a supply curve, this is quantity, then whatever course you did, you may have seen a supply curve like this, right? এরকম আচ্ছা, in that case যেটা হয়েছে, it has only one intercept on this axis. If you have seen a demand curve, say like this,
Yes, sir.
then this one has two intercepts, one over here, one over here. এখন কেউ যদি বলে, আচ্ছা আমি যদি সাপ্লাই কার্ভটা এদিকে আগে এগিয়ে দেই, সমস্যাটা কোথায়? হ্যাঁ, অফকোর্স উই ক্যান, বাট তাতে কি কোয়ান্টিটি নেগেটিভ হয়ে যাচ্ছে না?
জি স্যার।
Yes, sir.
That's not allowed. আচ্ছা, কেউ যদি বলে আমি ডিমান্ড কার্ভটা এদিকে নামাতে চাই, ওকে, ডু দ্যাট, তাহলে কি প্রাইস কি নেগেটিভ হচ্ছে না?
Yes, sir.
That's not allowed. কেউ যদি আমি ডিমান্ড কার্ভটা এদিকে আগাতে চাই, ওকে, you do it. In that case, quantity becomes negative. That's not allowed. That's why
Yes,
this is the logic. Since we are focusing only on one axis, then what এই কারণে we will have an intercept or two intercepts. This is the first hypothesis we draw. Next hypothesis that we want to draw from this particular data is the concept of slope. I'm now assuming nobody in this class understands what slope is, but if we look at the word, slope বলতে কি বোঝায়? ঢাল বোঝায় না? কতটুকু ঢেলে আছে? বাংলায় বল,
Yes, sir.
হ্যাঁ? আচ্ছা, আচ্ছা, এটা কি ঢেলে আছে?
No, sir.
ঢেলে নাই, তাই
No,
না?
sir.
টোটালি মানে ভার্টিক্যাল।
Vertical.
এটা টোটালি হরিজন্টাল, মানে কি টোটালি ঢেলে গেছে না?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So when we use the word slope, we look at the inclination of the line to the reference axis. The word reference axis will be clarified and explained later. But আমরা যখনই বলছি slope, এটা ঢাল, বাংলা হচ্ছে ঢাল, তাহলে কতটুকু ঢেলে পড়ছে? If we just look at it, মানে ask it verbally, the প্রশ্ন ওটাই আসছে, কতটুকু ঢেলে পড়ছে? So if we say like this, then how inclined it is it to the reference axis? আচ্ছা, এখন reference axis বলতে কি বোঝায়? একটু এই জিনিসগুলো আবার once we get to the graphs আমরা আবার আসবে। Is this vertical, this line?
No, sir.
এটা vertical না?
Yes, sir, it's vertical.
Yes, sir.
আচ্ছা, does anybody disagree with me?
No, sir.
No, sir.
Nobody disagrees. Very good. Now, why did I say the word reference axis? This red line, the y is equal to function of x, is vertical to the x-axis if our x-axis are independent variable.
Sir, can you repeat again?
I'm watching. In mathematics, by convention, we always say that the x-axis is the vertical axis, right? It's an independent axis, right?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Acha, in that case, this graph is creating a 90-degree to this axis, the independent axis, right?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
কিন্তু আমরা বলছি, in economics, the vertical axis is the independent axis. So if the reference axis, এই জন্য আমি reference শব্দটা এখন clarify করছি, if the reference axis is not x as the independent under the mathematics convention, তাহলে কি এই red লাইনটা কি vertical নাকি horizontal to the reference axis?
Horizontal.
এইবার, now ever clear visually?
Yes, sir.
If this is the independent axis under econ, then this axis is creating a 0-degree. It is vertical to the independent axis. Ever clear?
Yes, sir.
So এখন আমরা দেখি এই লাইনটা, আমরা এই লাইনটা দেখি, এটা আবার দেই, this is y is equal to function of x. If this is a mathematics function, what is the degree? 0 na?
Yes,
It's
sir.
parallel to the x-axis, right? Yes?
Yes, sir.
If this convention was the convention of economics, তাহলে এইটা যদি আমাদের independent axis হয় y, isn't it creating 90-degree to the y-axis?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Ever clear?
Yes, sir.
So when we use the word graph, we are indicating something that we are observing with our eyes. আচ্ছা, একটা চেয়ারের যে সিটটা আছে, if I look at it from the top, isn't it a minimization problem?
Yes, sir.
তাই না? This is the minimum point that I can go down to. If I look at the chair from the bottom, isn't the seat a maximization problem?
Yes.
আমি যদি উঠতে থাকি আমি এই সিটের উপরে উঠতে পারবো আর উঠা যাবে so when we say that we are making a graphical analysis, a lot of our analysis depends on how we are looking, from where are we looking. So under mathematics, since x, we are wired to see x as the independent variable. Any vertical line that we see under mathematics is 90 degree becomes 0 degree in economics, since it is parallel to the y-axis. Any line that we see horizontal to the x-axis, mathematically we are wired to see that as 0 degree. Kintu won't that be 90 degree to the y-axis?
Yes, sir.
So এই জিনিসটা বলার উদ্দেশ্যটা হচ্ছে since we marshal for visual convenience made price the independent axis on the vertical axis, এই প্রবলেমটা arise করেছে visually. It is not a problem, but the thing is that if you are wired totally mathematically, হঠাৎ দেখা যাবে কি ব্যাপার, আমরা যখন ইলাস্টিসিটি অফ ডিমান্ড বলবো যে এই একটা ভার্টিক্যাল লাইন দেখছি, এটা ইলাস্টিসিটি 0 হয় কেমনে? ইলাস্টিসিটি 90 ডিগ্রি হওয়া উচিত না?
Sir. Economically এটা চেঞ্জ হয়ে গেল।
তখন আমরা বলবো কেন? If we consider price the y axis as the independent variable, তাহলে অবশ্যই তখন 0 ডিগ্রি হবে। এবার ক্লিয়ার? আচ্ছা, এখন দেখা যাক, let's get back to this table. If the consumer decides to buy one DVD less, how many CDs can she get?
2.
Achha, if she decides to buy one more, how many CDs can she get? 2 plus. Right? If she decides to buy one DVD less, how many CDs can she get? 2 na?
2.
This is the mathematical way of measuring a slope. Okay. Are you familiar with this definition of a slope? Change in y due to change in x?
Yes, sir.
আচ্ছা, আমি এখানে y টাকে ডিপেন্ডেন্ট লিখছি, x টাকে ইন্ডিপেন্ডেন্ট লিখছি। What we are going to do, we are going to verbally write down what this thing says. Change in y due to change in x. Focus on the due to. If we say there is a change in y due to a change in x, does that automatically say that x is the independent variable? Do you read it as
Yes, sir.
এভাবে
Yes,
read
sir.
আমরা যদি
Yes.
বলি there is a change
Yes,
in y due to change in x, তার মানে definitely the change in y
X আগে চেঞ্জ হবে। Yes, sir.
depending on the change in x. আচ্ছা, কেউ যদি বলে যে না ঠিক আছে স্লোপ হচ্ছে এই, তাতেও কিছু এসে যায় না, this will be the dependent, this will be the independent. So what does that mean? Change in এটা হয়ে যাবে, this one will be change in x due to change in.
Change in Y.
So from here we read that x is the dependent variable. This change is happening due to change in y. Acha. When we indicate a change, the change is always in comparison to something. If I say that the speed of a car is 100 kilometer, it means nothing. But if I say 100 kilometer in reference to time, 100 kilometers per hour, তাহলে কিন্তু we understand something, তাই না?
জি স্যার সময়ের কারণ জি স্যার
If I say something is moving at 5 miles, you might think that it's a rickshaw, but it could be a rocket, 5 miles per second. Right? So the thing is, whenever we are indicating some change movement, that movement will be in reference to some unit. So slope tau tai. We are comparing the change in the dependent variable due to the change in the independent variable.
Yes, sir.
So when we represent something as a ratio, niche jeta thake, that is the reference variable. Upore jeta thakbe, that is the change that we want to look at in respect to the reference variable. Ever clear? So
Yes,
if
sir.
something is the speed of a car is 100 miles or 100 kilometer, it makes no sense until and unless we say 100 kilometer per hour. Because if something is moving at 100 kilometer per second, definitely can't be a car. It definitely has to be a rocket.
Yes, sir.
ঠিক আছে, so the thing is এই যে রেশিওটা, আচ্ছা এখন দেখা যাক তো এই রেশিওটা কি সব জায়গায় সেম? If I sacrifice one DVD, I can get 2 CDs. If I sacrifice another 1 DVD, I get another 2. তাহলে প্রত্যেকবার কি এই রেশিওটা সেম থেকে যাচ্ছে না?
জি স্যার
আচ্ছা, this is what we are going to now look at. We are still moving on mathematics convention. আমরা economics convention এ যাচ্ছি না. Has anybody learned the slope as rise divided by run?
No, sir.
Okay, no problem. দরকার নাই. Since you haven't, we'll try now. We're still moving on mathematics convention. Acha, is this how you looked at a slope?
Yes, sir.
এভাবে তো দেখা হয়েছে, তাই না? Then we looked at A and then we looked at B.
B.
Probably your teacher showed you the movement from A to B, right?
Yes, sir.
Acha, if your teacher showed you the movement from A to B, then your teacher must have also showed you this thing. Right now?
Yes, sir.
Then we went like this. Slope. Oh. Change in Y due to
Change in X.
change in X. Acha, since we are in mathematics, any Y movement is rise na? Since it's on
Yes,
the
sir.
any horizontal movement will be run.
Run.
So if we run on the horizontal axis. If we go up and down, we go up and down on the vertical axis.
The vertical.
That's why in mathematics, এটা অনেক হাই স্কুলে, I don't know, maybe you guys ওইভাবে হয় নাই, সেটা হচ্ছে the slope is just shown as the ratio between rise and run. তাহলে এইখানে আমরা যখন A থেকে B তে যাচ্ছি, what is happening to the y axis? কমে যাচ্ছে না?
জি স্যার
আচ্ছা, what is happening to the x axis? বেড়ে যাচ্ছে না?
বেড়ে যাচ্ছে।
এখন forget the value. If one is minus and the other is plus, then this must be a negative value, right? Right?
Yes, sir.
আচ্ছা, এখন দেখো, when we are saying that a ratio is negative, that means the curve must be falling. Why? Rise যদি কমে আর x যদি বাড়ে, this can only be possible if the curve is falling.
Yes, sir.
The same ratio was positive, rise ও বেড়ে যাবে, x ও বেড়ে যাবে.
Follow. Yes, sir.
An upward relationship. So when we are looking at a negative slope, by default we are looking at a downward sloping curve. When
Yes.
we are looking at a positive slope, by default we are
Upward.
visualizing an upward sloping curve.
Sir.
ঠিক আছে? হ্যাঁ? আচ্ছা, এখন who has forgotten that the slope along a straight line is always the same? এটা কে ভুলে গেছে? Is there anybody in the class?
ভুলে গেছি স্যার
Very good. I want people to forget.
ভুলে গেছি
What? Huh? Are you the only one who has forgotten that the
ভুলে গেছি
Yes, sir. Same.
আচ্ছা, very good. আস্তে আস্তে সবাই ভুললেই আমি আরো খুশি।
সবাই ভুলে গেছে স্যার
ভুলে গেছি
হয় কি এটা অনেক আগে পড়া হয়েছে, হয়তো চর্চা করা হয়নি। আর one of the basic problems with our school education, not only in Bangladesh, this is applicable everywhere since Sumerian times. If you know mathematics, you're a genius. If you don't know mathematics, you're an idiot, তাই না? ছোটবেলা থেকে এই ধরনের একটা কালচার,
এমনটাই সামাজিক কাঠামোতে এটাই দেখা যায়।
সে কেমনে একটা ইডিয়েট হয় আমাকে বলো তো? যে ছবি আঁকতে পারে সে কিভাবে একটা ইডিয়েট হয়, তাই না?
তা হ্যাঁ, সেটি ঠিক।
It's not our fault. আচ্ছা, যে 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 বলার উদ্দেশ্যটা হচ্ছে why the slope on the straight line is the same. The slope means inclination. Our reference axis is x. X থেকে কতটুকু inclined. পুরোটা জুড়ে যদি inclinationটা same হয়, then it must be a straight line. Let me give a classic example. We are familiar with the স্মৃতিসৌধ, তাই না?
জি স্যার।
Yes, sir.
স্মৃতিসৌধতে the first this is 90 degrees, right?
জি স্যার।
Yes, sir.
তারপর আমরা এখানে 7টা স্তম্ভ আছে, এই স্তম্ভটা দেখো তো একদম this one, the one over here, এটার inclination আর এটার inclination the same.
না স্যার।
No, sir.
নো স্যার
So আচ্ছা, এখানে আরো আছে নাকি? এই তো এই যে এখানে না, এখানে এই যে এটা তো বোঝা যাবে। এই যে look at this one, each one of them is a straight line. স্মৃতিসৌধে it's a very simple architecture, just 7টা straight line আছে. Look at the inclination of this, the first one, look at the inclination of the second one, look at the inclination of the third one. Inclination টা আস্তে আস্তে চেঞ্জ হয়ে যাচ্ছে না?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
জি স্যার।
X is our reference axis. ওই সরল রেখাটা ঢালটা চেঞ্জ হয়ে যাচ্ছে, but since it is a straight line, ঢালটা কিন্তু entire straight line এ কিন্তু সেম থেকে যাচ্ছে in comparison to the কি বলে x axis, তাই না?
জি স্যার।
So another thing that we probably know from high school maths is that কি বলে it will be totally the same. আচ্ছা, এখন এই জিনিসটা দেখো, the ratio of how y changes in ratio to x. This is mathematics. If we are looking at economic slope, তাহলে আমরা কি বলবো ratio of y to ratio of x, নাকি আমরা বলবো ratio of x to ratio of y?
Sir, y to x.
Correct. যখন আমরা ম্যাথমেটিক্স কনভেনশনটা দেখছি, আমরা ভার্টিক্যাল অ্যাক্সিসের ইনক্লিনেশনটা দেখছি in reference to the x axis. Why? Because the x axis is our reference axis, i.e. the independent axis. But when we are looking at economics, we're looking at the change of x in relation to the vertical axis. Why? Because y is the vertical axis, the vertical axis is now our reference axis, which is the independent axis. Ever clear? আচ্ছা এখানে জিনিসটা আরো ইজি হবে। If you look at figure 2.5 in Steels and Wolf, page 47, slope is always, this is the common definition of slope, the general definition. Change in dependent due to change in independent. এখন প্রশ্ন হচ্ছে independent কোনটা, dependent কোনটা? If independent in x, then we are looking at the change in y. If the independent is y, we are looking at the change in x. Ever clear?
স্যার এবার বুঝতে পারলাম। জি স্যার।
এখন দেখো রেশিও ফর্মুলাটা কি? If del by del x is our mathematical slope whose value is 2, the ratio, তাহলে ইকোনমিক্স এটা হাফ হয়ে যাবে না?
জি স্যার।
এই যে del y by del x is equal to 2. But since economics এ আমরা axis দুটো উল্টিয়ে দিয়েছি, so we are not looking at del y by del x, we are looking at del x by del y. তাহলে del x by del y তাহলে কি হাফ হয়ে যাবে না?
জি স্যার।
Is it clear to everybody now?
স্যার আমরা এটা উল্টে দিলাম কেন, এটা একটু মানে ক্লিয়ার না আমার কাছে। এটা কি
আচ্ছা,
ম্যাথমেটিক্স এর ক্ষেত্রে আমরা উল্টে দিব?
আচ্ছা did you come late?
স্যার নেট অনেক প্রবলেম করছে, আমি একটু বুঝতে পারছি, আমার নেট চলে যাচ্ছে, আবার আটকে যাচ্ছে।
আচ্ছা ঠিক আছে, সেটা হচ্ছে there was this economist, his name is Alfred Marshall. ও করেছে,
উনি ওনার মতো করে করেছে।
he was obsessed with drawing graphs. He was a wonderful mathematician. So he was trying to make non-mathematics the audience understand economics. So এখন সে কি করবে, সে করলো কি প্রাইসটাকে ইন্ডিপেন্ডেন্ট অ্যাক্সিসে দিয়ে দিল on the y axis. So if you are from a mathematics background, you are wired to see x as the independent axis, right? ঠিক তো, যে জেরি করে আসছে?
Yes sir.
So if I say that no, from tomorrow morning y is the independent axis, তাহলে রেশিওটা উল্টে যাবে না?
Yes sir.
So if mathematicians say that what del y by del x is equal to 2, an economist will read it as del x by del y is equal to half. Ever clear?
Yes sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, now no problem. If you have any doubts, just ask me. আচ্ছা তাহলে এই যে ratio is -2. What does this mean? First, the minus and the plus sign means is it downward sloping or upward sloping? যেহেতু আমাদের সামনে একটা মাইনাস আছে, it must be downward sloping.
Downwards.
আচ্ছা, what does 2 mean? When we say that the ratio is 2, say the
Upward.
tea in India is 20
del
taka,
y by del x.
and the price of tea, that same tea in Bangladesh is 10 taka. তাহলে Indian tea is 2 times the price of Bangladeshi tea. তাই না? If we are comparing it with Bangladeshi tea,
জি স্যার।
আচ্ছা কেউ যদি বলেন আমি বাংলাদেশ টির সাথে কম্পেয়ার করব, I want to do the opposite. I want to compare the Indian tea with the Bangladeshi tea. তাহলে হাফ হয়ে যাবে না?
জি স্যার।
এবার ক্লিয়ার তো? মানে when we are comparing Indian tea with Bangladeshi tea, we say okay, the price of Indian tea is double the price of Bangladeshi tea. If somebody says I want to do the opposite, তাহলে আমরা বলবো Bangladeshi tea is half the price of Indian tea.
জি স্যার।
ঠিক আছে, সো ওই যে আবার এই প্রশ্নটা আসছে, since we are making a graphical analysis which is a visual analysis, সেটা হচ্ছে depends on how we see something and from where we see something, and a good way of understanding is the seat of the chair. এখন উপর থেকে যদি দেখি it's a minimization problem, আমি সিটের নিচে আর যেতে পারবো না. If I look at the same chair from the bottom, আমি এই সিটের উপরে আর যেতে পারছি না. ঠিক আছে?
Yes sir.
আচ্ছা এখন number 3 topic হচ্ছে how to interpret a ratio. The first question we want to ask is, where does the word ratio come from? Ratio is just a mathematical expression. Maybe we are not wired to think mathematically, but we are definitely wired to do one thing, and that is ratio comes from the word relation.
Isn't it comparison?
আমি এখনই বলতেছি yes, you're correct. When we say relation, that they definitely we are comparing something with something, right?
Yes, sir.
How expensive or how inexpensive is Indian tea compared to Bangladeshi tea, or the reverse? How expensive, how inexpensive is Bangladeshi tea compared to Indian tea? The এটা রেশিও বের করতেই হবে আমাদেরকে, and the moment we have to find out a ratio, we are definitely comparing something against something, right?
Yes, sir.
And নিচে যেটা থাকবে, that is the reference. So speed in relation to time, 100 kilometers per hour. যেটা ইন্ডিপেন্ডেন্ট, যেটা সাপেক্ষে আমরা কম্পেয়ার করছি, that will always be in the denominator. ঠিক আছে? আর যেটাকে আমরা কম্পেয়ার করছি, that will be on the numerator.
Denominator. Yes, sir. Numerator.
So আমরা যদি বলি,
এটা-
sorry, yeah, carry on, sorry, somebody said something.
স্যার যেটা বুঝতে পারিনি, আবার একটু বলে ভালো হতো।
সেটা হচ্ছে আমরা, okay, now I'm okay. Hey, Zawad Hussain, did you experience hanging the network?
Sorry, sir.
Did you experience a hanging of the network?
Yeah.
Yeah, তো তোমার আমার একসাথে হয়েছে, কারণ হঠাৎ করে দেখলাম তোমার চোখটা একদম পুরো স্টিল হয়ে গেছে, কি ব্যাপার? হ্যাঁ, এটা আমারটাও স্টিল হয়ে গেছিল। আচ্ছা, what was that question one girl asked just now?
Sir, I asked যেটা compare করছি, the one I am comparing, that will be denominator.
আচ্ছা, কেন ডিনোমিনেটর হবে? সেটা হচ্ছে, if I say something is moving at 100 miles, it makes no sense. If I say something is moving at 100 miles per hour in reference to time, then you will visualize it's a car. If I say something is moving at 100 miles per second, you will not visualize it as a car, will you? You will visualize it as a rocket.
Yes.
So আমরা যখন বলছি Indian tea in relation to Bangladeshi tea is double, then আমরা Indian tea কে compare করছি Bangladeshi tea এর সাপেক্ষে, and that will always be on the denominator. Distance in relation to time. The opposite will also be true. আমরা যদি Bangladeshi tea টাকে Indian tea সাপেক্ষে compare করি, then we will say Bangladeshi tea is half the price of Indian tea in relation to Indian tea. তখন Indian tea টা denominator-এ চলে আসবে 1/2. Is it clear now? Okay, আমি এখন আজান দিচ্ছে, এখন 7:38 বাজে। When do we start again? 7:50? Last class আমরা 7:50 শুরু করেছিলাম। ঠিক আছে, we'll
Okay,
start.
sir.
I'll stop it.